spot on the video now. Anyway, they are a distinguished couple known globally. They teach globally. They've just done their fourth. Let me just bring the book. Did you bring the book?
Oh, there it is.
They've just published their fourth book. It's entitled That Which Does Kill Us. Let's see. How one couple became stronger at the broken places. And the picture on this is actually Linda and Charlie at their wedding. Yeah, so we can pass it around if you can. Anyway, these two incredible people have been doing this for well over 40 years. They've given a lot of their life over to learning the ability of not only figuring out how they should have a relationship, but also spending a lot of their life helping others discover how to do that. They have insights that I think this morning you'll find out. How many people have delved into the book? That's fine. Good. I hope you enjoyed it. So it's about what we become when we become juniors and seniors in college. We've pretty well formulated our self-image of ourselves and how we're supposed to form it and participate in our world. And for many, many of us, that never ends up long-term working very well. Remember that pleasure is short-term, happiness is long-term. So this morning they're going to share with us their incredible journey, and they're going to be open for questions that you may have, and anything, Professor, that you'd like to add.
I just want to add that you're going to be incredibly lucky this morning. The way Charlie and Linda open themselves up to the groups that they participate with and share on such an honest level and on such an intimate level, that it's a great opportunity for you to learn how a number of skills, learnings, practices about how to have successful relationships. And I'm sure a lot of you have had relationships, probably a number of relationships. Some of them might have been good, some of them might have been not so good. So it'll be a chance for you to explore your questions about how do you maintain a relationship on a long-term basis if that's something you want to do in your lifetime.
So, please open. Don't be afraid to stand in that fire. Put yourself out there. The more you put yourself out, the more you become transparent, the more you make your vulnerability known, the better this class is going to be. So, join me in welcoming Charlie and Linda.
This is my main squeeze over here, and I've been squeezing him. September of this year is going to be 50 years.
Squeeze my hand in.
50 years. Can you imagine that? It's a long time. We've been together a long time. And when we got together, we were about the age that you folks are right now. I was in my early 20s. He was in his early 20s. We were flower children back in the 60s with bell-bottom pants. And he was a guitar picking
Your
hippie.
grandparents may have told you about that in those days.
And we have, had a wonderful relationship, and we've had kids, and we've had a difficult relationship, and it looked like we weren't going to make it, and we pulled out of that, and we have been enjoying a golden age for a couple of decades now. I'm happy to report. And I would like to do this class today a little bit differently than I've done it before. The teaching style that I have is to pull on research from other people in the field, from our own 40 years plus experience being therapists, workshop leaders, and co-authors. And I always sprinkle in a little personal, just to, make it real and make it more authentic. So it's juicy, that it's not just boring. The data and the research can be really flat and lifeless. But I wanted to add another dimension today, just because I'm teaching about taking risks, and so I feel like I ought to live what I teach. And I woke up with this bright idea this morning. When I was your age, I always longed to have a wise relative to consult for me and my family. I used to imagine them. Maybe some of you were lucky enough to have a really wise parent or grandparent or older sibling or aunt, uncle, or cousin. I didn't have one, so I had imaginary ones that I would imagine that they would counsel me. So if you want to play this little game with me this morning, I would like you, just for a couple of hours, to imagine that I'm a relative of yours. Now, of course, I haven't been in your life before now, and I'm not going to probably be in your life after now, literally. I hope I'm going to make a strong enough impression that I get into your psyche so that you'll hear, and reading the book will do it too, you'll hear a little Linda, Auntie Linda or Grammy Linda sitting on your shoulder, whispering in your ears and consulting you about how to have great romantic partnership. And that's transferable to other relationships too. So I want to assure you that this is in no way being disloyal to your family of origin, to an imaginary game of having somebody else be in your family to give you maybe a little bit different perspective than they offer to you, because every parent loves and adores their children and wants the best for them to have great relationships and to be successful. So they I think would give their blessing. They would want you to open as much as you could to the message that I will stimulate your imagination to consider and see if it fits for you. You don't have to believe it. You don't have to buy it. But I would invite you to consider it. If I had had somebody that I really trusted to give me guidance, somebody in my family that I thought was wise, who had the kind of relationship that I could admire, where they were honest with each other, where they had a spirit of adventure, where they really wanted to co-create their life together, where they weren't just living the scripts and the roles of this is what the mother does and this is what the father does and this is what the wife does and this is what the husband does. But they wanted to be more creative than that, and they wanted to co-design something that really fit their needs, that fit their style of being in the world, and that they made a deal with each other to bring out the best in each other. I see your potential. I see your great raw materials. Could I support you? Could I support you to grow into the best that you could be? And I want you to do that for me too. Could you help me see some talents, some gifts, some things that I may not see in myself or not own in myself? Could you help me to grow into them, to mature, to own my creative artist, to own my warrior woman who's strong and powerful and can take on challenges and won't wimp out? Can we make that kind of a deal with each other, that we want to handle differences really beautifully, not play a power and submission game about who's going to win and who has to lose, and then you don't like being down, and so you start grabbing power. Could we investigate together how we could share power and really be cooperative partners? And I didn't even know how to formulate those questions when we first got together, because I was at the mercy of the romantic illusions that just because we love each other, it ought to just all flow out of that. And just because the sex is so good, this is a cautionary warning, it may be so compelling when the sexual relationship is so strong that it can blind you to other things, like that they don't have values in common with you, or they don't have life goals in common with you. And so be careful about that. Be careful, because the oxytocin, when you're having the good sex, is like glue. And you can really get glommed onto somebody before you even really know who they are, and know if they have good values, know if they have a good work ethic, know if they have similar life goals to your own. So that's just a little warning there. Want to say hi to the group?
Hi.
Have something you want to say to the group?
No.
Okay, then I'll keep talking. He has plenty to say, and he has a lot of accumulated wisdom. And I'm very grateful that we can teach together. I feel really blessed that I have work that I love and that I can do it with my beloved. So I feel like I really hit the jackpot. I often talk to people about the work that they do. And I find that the people who are in service, like teachers and nurses and doctors, attorneys, these people really get lit up when they talk about their work. The creative artists do too. And the people who have work that they love bring their happy self to the relationship, which I think is a big advantage. And so choosing a career that really fits you, do you know, that fits your values, that fits your style of being in the world. People sometimes don't connect the dots about that, but so much of having a happy, great relationship with a partner really starts with us, with having a really good relationship with ourselves, with having a sense of worthiness, that we deserve to have work that we enjoy. Because you spend so much time on the job, hours every week, that choose carefully. And if when you get out of school you find yourself in a job that really doesn't light you up, not to be afraid to change it. Do you know? That's a very different thing than a disposable romantic partnership. I don't really believe in disposable partnerships. I know it's getting easier and easier with all the availability of all the options on your tech devices. You hit a little rough place in your relationship, you have an argument or a disappointment or a misunderstanding. It's too hard, go get another one. I think it's dangerous. I think it's not giving yourself an opportunity to grow stronger and to grow more resilient by going through the tough challenges and popping up the other side. Because there's so much to be learned, so much to be experienced when you hit those rough places.
I just thought of something I wanted to say.
I'll shut up then.
Welcome. It's really good to be here. And I really enjoy coming to do these talks here that Helena and Joe have been inviting us to do for a few years. And we've been working with couples and living groups for a long time. But most of the people that we work with are people who are well into middle age. I mean, like old people, like some of them even in their 40s. And it's really, I don't know if you can appreciate this, but it's really gratifying to be speaking to people your age, who are young, before they get out there and really establish committed partnerships. Some of you may already be in them, but if you are, you're in the early stages of it. We generally don't get to see people until they've been at it, either with this person or with previous relationships, long enough to challenge their belief that they don't have anything to learn. You know, one of the things that it takes to be a good learner, a good student, is the H word, humility. Anybody know what humility means? Yeah, it comes from the same origin as the word humble. Humble and humility come from the same root. And that's humus, the same root as the word humus, which, what does humus mean?
Soil.
Soil, yeah. Soil, it's like the earth. It's like, it's the, and humility is really feeling like you know your place in the earth. You know who you are. You know where you belong. You don't necessarily know what's right for other people. You don't necessarily know answers to all of your questions, but you know who you are. You're neither a small, irrelevant, insignificant speck, nor are you an omnipotent God. But you're somewhere in between that. And where you belong is in neither hell nor heaven, but here on the earth. And what it takes to be a good student is the recognition that I have some things that I need to learn. When you're young, I remember when I was young, I used to feel like I knew it all. You know, and I didn't really have much use to hear. If I had had relatives who would have given me guidance and advice, I wouldn't have taken it anyway, probably, because I already knew. And some of you think that you already know, and you do. But here's the bad news, is that some of what you think you know isn't true. Okay? Some of what you believe is correct, right, or true may not be. In fact, guaranteed, some of it isn't. Now, the thing is, it's really hard to know exactly how do you tell what I really firmly believe is true and what I really firmly believe isn't true. That's a pretty important question. Can you understand why it could be difficult for you if you couldn't distinguish those two things? What sort of things might happen in your life if you weren't able to discern what's true and accurate from what isn't?
You'd be misled.
You'd be misled. You would be misled by your own lack of clarity. And so you would end up, when you're misled, you don't end up in the place that you think you're going to end up. You know, because you are led to someplace else. So, getting back to what I was saying earlier, I really appreciate having the opportunity to be with people who are open to learning. They haven't established some of the barriers to open-mindedness that some of the adults in your life and older people in your life may have. We call it a hardening of the attitudes. And that's when you just kind of get tunnel vision and you just get plugged into, this is the way it is and I'm not open to this idea, and you know, this isn't right, this is it. There's a term called confirmation bias. Anybody ever heard that term? Confirmation bias? Mm-hmm. It means that once we decide something is true, then what we do is we collect evidence to validate that belief, and we don't even see things that are contradictory to that. So, at a certain point in their lives, a lot of people just start getting possessed by confirmation bias. And instead of looking to see, well, what else is possible? Consider that could be, right? Or, I don't know. But just to be open to considering things. But you have the opportunity, because your neurological pathways have not been rigidified to the degree that they can. It's not inevitable, but they can, over years and decades, get rigidified, and then there's no more learning. It's just narrowing down. This is the way it is, And you know what kind of a life that is probably going to create for somebody who's not really open to learning and only interested in validating and reaffirming what they already know. How would you characterize the life that kind of a person is going to have? What would you guess their life experience would be? Routine. Routine. Repetitive. Narrow. Unimaginative. Unexciting. Boring. And what often people think when they're having that experience is that, oh, well, it's, I guess I need to change something. I need to, get a new haircut, or I need to move, or I need to get a different job, or I need to divorce my partner, because that's the problem. That's why I don't feel alive and passionate anymore. Or maybe they might assume that, well, that's just how it is when you get older. Any of you ever thought that when you get older, your life does get kind of narrowed down and routine and kind of boring and, repetitive? Be honest. How many of you have ever thought that that's kind of how it is? Yeah. I mean, I used to think that too. Until I got, well, I haven't gotten old yet, but, I'm
You're
older.
old.
I'm
You're
older
old.
now than I used to be. And so are you. And if you're lucky, you'll continue to get older, because you know what the alternative is. Not so good. So it's within your power to keep your life open, to keep the options open, to keep your mind open, to keep your heart open, to keep being open to seeing life as it is, rather than to keep trying to fit it into a box that you've been told is the way it's supposed to be. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that is going to support you in doing that is being in a committed partnership. Not necessarily now, although it could be, but that as you become clearer about who you are, and it's pretty unlikely that you're really clear about it at this stage of the game, but as you become clearer, the clearer you are about who you are, the more able you're going to be to choose a person who fits you.
So Charlie is offering you some profound wisdom now. And we chose each other when we were in our early 20s. I think it would have been an advantage if we had waited a little bit longer and grown up a little bit more. I think it would have helped us get off to a stronger start. But I didn't have anybody in my family to advise me to slow down and to get to know him better and get to know myself better.
If you had, and they had given you that advice, we probably wouldn't be here now.
I don't know. I think I probably would have stuck with you, but I might have held back a little bit and not jumped in feet first so fast. And I hope you don't mind me telling them, but...
Oh, wait a minute. Tell me what you're going to tell them.
Moved in the day we met.
Oh.
So the
No,
day...
they're going to censor that one.
the-
They're gonna censor that one.
No, not. I'm going to tell them.
That's
The
one
day
of the
we
one of
met-
the secrets of great relationships is to know that you cannot silence your partner. And if you try
they-
to, they're only going to say more than they would have if you hadn't tried.
And if you feel confident that this is something important, then you just deal with the disapproval. So that's part of what you do. So the day I met Charlie, I fell for him pretty hard right away. And I took him home. And he,
What was it? It wasn't exactly me that you fell for.
I was in a bad girl part of my life, being busy, being in recovery from goody two-shoes that I had been for way too long. And so we had some illicit substances. I'm not recommending it, but that's what
Oh,
we
you're
were
really going over
doing
the
at
top
parties
now.
in the 60s, and went on a motorcycle
Oh.
ride,
Man.
and then took him home. And
That's not my experience. It was my motorcycle that you were riding on the back of, and I took you to your house, and then I came in.
And-
You didn't take me home.
and he
I
stayed.
took you to your
And
home.
he stayed.
And
And that's
an important distinction.
different
Really.
points of view. But I don't think that that is a very good beginning for a
I
relationship.
thought it was a
think I
pretty
jumped.
good beginning.
It was exciting. It was exciting. But with maturity, I think it's really a good idea to get to know who you're throwing in with. Do you know? He turned out to be a splendid human being, but I didn't know him well enough to know if he was an asshole. And I took a chance. Okay, so I got a good one. But I'm saying that I'm telling you exactly what I said to my kids. The trying 20s are called the trying 20s because you're supposed to try a lot of different things. Yeah.
LSD,
Not selling the drugs. You-
robbing banks, get it out of your system.
You
Get
maybe
it out- get it
try
out of your
on,
system.
try on for size a lot of different majors, a lot of different visions for career options, and try on a lot of different kinds of people that you date. Maybe you date somebody younger, maybe you date somebody older, maybe you date somebody from a different race or ethnic group or a religion. Maybe you date somebody who has different political orientation than you do. And you see more about who you are as you're experimental. And I think that's a good idea, because by the time we get to the late 20s, not the early 20s, a lot happens in that period of time. Late 20s or 30s, we're starting to really know who we are, where we're going. We've usually got our academic degrees behind us, and we've chosen some work that we want to do, and you know more about who you are and your values and who you're compatible with. So the chances of making a choice that could last a lifetime are really increased. So I offer that to you to consider. I also want to emphasize the point that if you have a lot of doubts and misgivings because you didn't come from a family where you had a really loving, respectful partnership in the form of your parents to model after, do not despair. Neither one of us had good models in our family. I know that there are people who are sitting in this room who come from family. There might be addiction, alcohol and drugs. There might be somebody left. You might come from a family that broke up. Abandonment is rampant and common. You might come from a family that only fights behind closed doors, or maybe they don't fight at all, so you don't know how to deal with differences and conflict. And maybe you come from the screamers and the shouters and everybody just lets it fly and goes round and round and round. That was how it was in my family. They never really got complete with anything, had the same arguments over and over for decades. And I wish I had somebody wise in my family to sit me down and say, you are not doomed to have a terrible relationship because you didn't have a good model. In fact, they taught you a lot about what not to do. And if they are dishonest, we can make a commitment to being honest. And if they were screamers and shouters, we can make a commitment to find out how to speak our truth without all that blame and judgment and threat and manipulation. And if they were avoiders, we can grow some strength to, to find our voice and find a way to speak about what we feel and what we need. And that's a good deal. That's a good contract to make with a partner, that you want to grow your skills together. You want to grow your qualities of courage and patience and forgiveness and loyalty and commitment, all of those good qualities that are required for a great relationship. So if you come from a difficult family, don't despair, because they were really important teachers about the things that you don't want, so they can motivate you and inspire you. If you happen to be part of that small statistical group that comes from a real functional family where they loved each other and they loved the kids and they were respectful and they handled differences well, do not be so arrogant as to think you're home free. Because we know some people like that, there are not a lot of them. They still have to learn how to negotiate for their needs. and how to express what they feel. And they still need to learn about boundaries. So nobody gets a free lunch. Having a great relationship, you earn your way into it. You don't luck into it. So I'm trying to save you some trouble here. That's why we come up here, to get these really young people off on a good foot. Do you know that you don't have the romantic illusion that it should all be easy and bliss and sweet strawberry slush? Do you know? It is that, and it is glorious, and it is the most wonderful, and there are going to be some dark times. I want to warn you, if you're in a deep, committed partnership, it's going to have seasons. There's going to be spring and a glorious, glowing summer and a colorful fall, but at some point there's going to be a dark, bitter winter. And just because the anger or the resentment or the disconnect or the loneliness looks so dark, that isn't necessarily where you quit, because there may be a beautiful spring coming and you'll need to do some work. Maybe some patience, and maybe some forgiveness, maybe some courage, maybe some resourcefulness and creativity. But if you're letting me be your wise relative, I'm trying to burst the romantic illusion that it's always going to be beautiful. Sometimes you're going to be called upon to dig down deeper to get more of who you can be to deal with the challenge. I hope I'm not scaring you. I'm just trying to introduce some reality.
I just thought of something else I want to say.
Do it.
You may have noticed that Linda and I are different in certain ways. I don't mean like she's a woman and I'm a man, but we have different personalities, different temperaments, different styles. Anybody notice that?
Hands?
Yeah.
You want to see show of hands?
Usually doesn't take
They
people.
see it.
Yeah. It usually doesn't take people too long to notice that. In fact, sometimes people have actually asked the question, how did you two ever get together? You know, like you are so different. I guess the answer is for the same reason that most other people who get together are very different too. You may have noticed that you may have had relationships with people who do in some ways seem to be very different, or that you find yourself attracted to people who are really different than you in terms of their personalities or sometimes even certain values. Any idea why that is? Why is it, do you think, that we tend to be attracted to people who really are not very much like us? Mm-hmm. That in some very clear ways, they're different. And, you know, doesn't it seem reasonable that we would be more attracted to people who are more like us? Why do you suppose that is? That we tend to get attracted to people who in some ways are significantly different. What do you think?
Break up the monotony.
Yeah.
We talked about the routine a little earlier, you know, how you get into routines and patterns and you just keep reinforcing them. Well, consider what life would be like if you were with somebody or in a committed relationship with somebody who was just like you. I mean, like there were really, you had the same personality styles, you had the same taste in things, you had the same likes and dislikes, that everything was totally simpatico.
Wouldn't that be easy?
Huh?
Wouldn't that be easy?
Wouldn't it be easy? Yeah. I mean, what does it sound like? What do you think?
I don't think that'd be easy. I can hardly handle myself. How would I be able to handle someone
I know
else?
it'd be like having to handle two yous, you know? Yeah, sounds awful. What else do you think it might be like? Something just like you.
I mean, wait, which question are you asking? Someone just like you or someone
Yeah,
opposite
like-
of you?
Just like
if
you.
it- What
Oh,
would it be
okay.
like if you, just like you?
I mean, I personally prefer someone who's more similar to I am, just because I feel like we have more to relate to.
A lot of
and-
common ground, that's a definite advantage.
Yeah, like sometimes
Definitely.
there's less conflict and
Yeah.
it just runs smoother.
You definitely want to have some things in common that you can relate from. I mean, you certainly don't want somebody who's got totally different values.
Yeah, or like a completely different lifestyle. 'cause,
Right,
like,
right.
I mean, you kind of pick up different tendencies from your partner, and
Yeah.
if they're bad, I don't want them to like rub off.
Right on.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a hand
Good-
over
good
here
point.
too. Are you complete? Hand over here.
It's less room for growth, because then you're staying in something that's known. Something that's some similarities to you, so you're not gonna grow as much.
Okay, I want to make sure everybody heard what you just said. So you're not going to grow as much, there's less room for growth, because you're just sort of reaffirming each other. So, which is nice. I mean, it is nice to have common ground, like we said. But if all you have is common ground and there's no difference there, then where's the impetus to look beyond where you are, to grow more? Yeah, please.
So I was watching the Winter Olympics.
Yeah.
And I was watching ice skating, and let's say over half of the couples were dating, have dated, or were married.
Yeah,
And I was just kind of thinking, I mean, how could they not be together? Yeah, I mean, they've spent so much time together, they have so much in common,
absolutely.
they have the same goals. So I can kind of relate that to this.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely advantages, and it's necessary to have a certain amount of common ground. You know, so you take two circles, and you know they're separate, and if there's no overlap, there's no common ground. However, if you put one exactly on top of the other one, there's nothing but overlap. So neither one of them is bringing anything new into the relationship. If you take two circles and they both kind of involve themselves with the other one, then there's room, the possibility, the need for growth, expansion, discovery, new possibilities. So we want to find some kind of a balance in which we can fit each other, but not on top of each other, so that there's no uncommon ground, but that there's enough common ground so that we have both, that we have the security of the relationship, the compatibility of having similar concerns, values, but not so much that we don't have anything to bring into the relationship outside of that. That's the challenge.
And when you're shopping, you know, when you're out on the hunt and you're looking for a potential partner, if that's one of your life goals is to partner up, then this is something to be looking for. Is there enough overlap and compatibility so that we can be at ease and secure and have some comfort in our relationship? And is there enough difference that it will be that spark, you know, that catalyzation, so that we don't have a boring relationship? Fortunately, there's some very deep, wise knowing, like sonar, that tends to bring us to people who are different enough from us. This is some wise, intuitive knowing. It might not be what we're telling ourselves about why we're attracted to them, but the soul knows what it's doing. And it brings us to people who are very different than we are. Maybe not as different as Charlie and I are, but different. And if you start to notice the differences, to bring an attitude of curiosity and wonder to the differences rather than, oh no, he's not the right one, she's not the right one, because we're so different. It tends to scare people or repel people, but we want to make a big space. Do you know, a big space for you to look at, maybe this person's strong in areas I'm not, and I'm strong in areas they're not.
Would there be something there, somewhat on a subconscious level, that we're also looking for the opposite to draw our shadows out?
That's exactly right. So what Alana is saying, on an unconscious level, that's what I'm talking about, the natural knowing or the deep knowing, there is a drive for mastery, to become a bigger person, to become more evolved, to be more whole. And so they may have parts that they're more adept in or more comfortable with showing, that we're keeping hidden in the shadows. And so Charlie's always been bold and outspoken and confident. This is the way I see it, this is the way it is. And when we first got together, people don't believe this about me now because I'm pretty outspoken. But when, decades ago, I was so shy and I didn't speak up and I didn't raise my hand in class and I had a fear of public speaking. And so I was very attracted to him for a lot of reasons, but one, because he was so bold and so self-assured. And I needed more of that. I like to think that he was attracted to me because of other things. I probably shouldn't say what they are, but I had strengths that he didn't have. Maybe he'll want to tell you that. And that we were magnetized to each other because some part of us knew that the other person had things that we needed to beef up. Do you know that we needed to own up? I needed to find my voice to be able to speak up, find my confidence, and never even let myself the whole time I was growing up ever think that I'd ever be a teacher. I'm so glad that he brought that part out of me, because being a teacher is a real high. Do you know, to have interesting people to meet wherever we go and to trade ideas and learn, and you have to do a survey of the literature so you know your subject well. It's forced me to learn a lot of things. But I don't want you to get frightened if you happen to be strongly attracted to somebody who's very different. They still might be a very suitable mate if you can open to, this person may have the biggest life teachings that I'm here on earth to learn this time through. And I want to learn from
Let
them.
me know when you're done.
I'm done.
You sure?
I'm okay
I don't want to
on,
interrupt you.
I'm okay on stepping
Okay.
back a little.
All right, so here's what I want to say. This thing about the differences, that's not the problem. The problem is not that we've got these differences. And what determines whether the differences contribute to your growth and to your ability to truly enjoy partaking in this relationship, or whether the differences take you down. What's going to determine that is whether you see the differences as problems that need to be resolved and can only be resolved by getting the other person to become the way they should be, which is, of course, more the way you are. And you know what it looks like when you've got each person in a relationship trying to convert the other person to something that they're not. It's not a pretty picture. But there is another way to view it other than we've got these differences here, and we have to homogenize our relationship so that there aren't any, because they're causing problems.
Can't do it anyway,
That's right. And
even if you try.
right. So the alternative to that is rather than seeing the differences as the problem, to see the differences as an opportunity, to see them as a gift, to see that, no, this is not a mistake I made in choosing this person. This is why I chose them. It's not despite the differences, it's actually because of them. The example that Linda used a few minutes ago about how because of the differences in our temperament, she was able to become more outgoing, more assertive, more willing to get out there. If I had the same tendency that she had, then the relationship would flatten out. So the opposite of flattening out is intensifying. And so what happened was that the differences that were there forced us to either break up or learn how to use the differences productively And rather than enable them to create conflict that ultimately would take the relationship down. In other words, to see them as a gift rather than a problem. To appreciate them rather than to resist them. And that's the challenge in all relationships, is to come to the point where you can actually see those things that you may be aggravated by or annoyed by or wish that they weren't like that, but to see, all right, so what's the possibility here? What's the opportunity for me? What's the value that this person is bringing to me by being the way he is, the way she is? Because there's something there. And if you can find that, you'll be less upset with them. You'll be less angry at them. You'll be less frustrated, because rather than trying to change them, you'll be more appreciative of how we have a chance here to get deeper, to get bigger, to have more pleasure, more learning, more growth than we would have had otherwise. So that's where we want to go. It's not about getting rid of them or homogenizing them or becoming one. I know you want to talk. Hang on. One person. But it's more about just being able to see them in a different way.
So
Okay,
there's three key
you're
points
on.
that I want to make,
Go for it.
and then I think we want to open and see what their questions are. So there are three things that I'm committed to giving you the opportunity to reflect on. First of all, I want to pull on some researchers in the positive psychology movement who study what it is that forms happiness. And what they say is the happiest people are the ones that have the greatest relationships, both the deepest and the breadth of relationships, and that a romantic partnership is central to people's well-being. So I want to make sure that people know that creating a great relationship really is going to boost you in your happiness and well-being, which also has ramifications for your health and longevity. You know, it's not just feeling good, it's also it's in your cells and tissues of your body. The other point that I wanted to make sure to make is when a relationship gets difficult, don't bail too soon. There may be tremendous opportunity for growth for you as an individual and for the two of you as a couple, and don't be shy to ask for help from friends, clergy, family members, and professional trained people who are good at this. The graduating class is ahead of you, because that can make all the difference. People keep going round and round with the same stuck places. And the last point that I want to go on the record with you is go for the gold. Why not? If you're going to be in a romantic partnership, why not work the growth model and use everything that the relationship tosses up, differences, boredom, needs, you know, sore spots you bring in from your family or whatever. Why not use it as the growth opportunity that is and go to the higher ranges of what is possible? It requires more. You see, nobody gives you a script in your hand for how to do marriage or committed partnership. Each couple's on their own to design their own, perfectly tailored to their needs, desires, goals, and values. But I invite you, because us ordinary folks, ordinary folks, can have extraordinary relationships, highly fulfilling relationships, the best that relationships can be. You've got to work at it. It doesn't just come to you. But from my point of view, that's worth putting time and effort towards. Okay, now I'm complete. I've said what I want to say.
All right, guys, let's come back together. And once again, that's COME.
we are, oh, here, I'm slamming her poor book around. If this is a gift, you don't have, we don't have to pass it
You
around.
could pass it around.
I'm gonna pass this around just so you can take a glance at it if you like. Please remember if you have to get up and go, to hold the door so that we don't have a bunch of clicking. Anybody that did use their electronics in the front, unless it was mandatory death sentence, if you didn't use it, let's please make sure that we're not engaged in something else. And without further ado, my good man,
Okay,
this is your podium.
round two.
I'll get the book. Yeah. So we want to give you an opportunity to let some questions about romantic partnership, emotional intimacy, sexual intimacy, commitment, differences, whatever is there for you. Because you have access to us, and we want you to have a chance to put your questions out there.
Just want to warn you that speaking for myself, I often don't answer questions, but I do respond to them. And if you don't know what the difference is, you'll see.
So, as we've been speaking, did it percolate in you? Do you have some questions that are coming up about relationships in your own life? I know you've had some experience dating in high school, dating in college, hitting rough spots, confusing spots. What kind of questions are presenting themselves to you?
I'm always trying to learn how to like maintain relationships long term. I feel like can only handle like one close friend at a time, and I'm like astonished when I see these people have this huge social network. It blows my mind. So I'm really good at meeting strangers, and I can maintain that for a little while. But when it comes to long term, you brought up boundaries and just like communication. I'm reading a book in the other class, the Crucial Conversations, right? And what I got from that was, you know, you got to be 100% respectful at the same time you're being 100% honest. You know, and I think that really promotes that. But at the same time, it's like, how do you maintain that? You know?
So you want to speak to it first? So I'm repeating for the video that she's got some concerns, and the challenge is about having long-term relationships, and particularly daunting for you is multiple long-term relationships. And I just want to normalize, you know, your experience. Yeah, relationships are really challenging. Even having one is a big challenge. And whether it's a friendship, do you know, or a romantic partnership, to be able to assess, are they really interested in knowing me? Are they interested in being my friend on the long term? Are they interested in being more than just superficial? Are they interested in going a little deeper to have meaningful conversations? Are they gonna be a good friend, or, you know, a casual friend? And as you practice, you get better at knowing who the people are who are eligible to be a close and a long-term friend. But I think it's always a good rule of thumb to risk being proactive, not to be reticent, you know, and shy and hold back and wait. That's my style. My style is to go after. If somebody is, you know, my most attractive person in the class, nowadays, when I was younger, I didn't have the courage to do it. I pick them out, and I said, I really liked what you said in class. I really liked the question you asked in class. I really liked the response you asked in class. And I would like to talk to you more about that. Do you have time? Because there are a lot of people hold back and are shy, and they need somebody who's a little bit more assertive to engage them and show interest, and often people will respond if we do that. if you reach out a few times to somebody that's really attractive to you, and they say, I gotta get to the next class, or I'm very busy, you'll know they're not eligible. But a lot of people will respond just if we gesture towards them that we're interested. And then if the relationship deepens because we're talking about things that have more meaning to us, then you can move away from casual into deep soul friend. And we're so blessed if we have a lot of people in our life like that. And a lot of the people that I know and hang out with, they met people in college that they got tight with, and they're still in contact with them. And so it's a big opportunity for you to pick out your favorites and see if they'll respond to your overtures to get to know you and really bond with you.
So the other part of that question too is how do you speak your truth all the time and keep that going in a respectful way?
Yes, and thank you for that clarification. Some people have had modeled in their family speaking truth in kind of a blunt way. Do you know,
I think
not,
I want the best for people, and I'm harsh in that way. And
Yeah.
like I'm blunt with my feelings of like wanting them to do well, so I give them a hard time or I heckle them. That was my love model for my family, you know?
your intentions are good.
Yeah.
And
But I sound like a bully.
if you speak with these people, you might want to have a few introductory remarks. I tend to be really assertive or aggressive, or I tell my clients, I'm very ambitious for my clients. If I'm overwhelming you, push back and give me some feedback that I'm, a little bit too far ahead. But I want you to trust me on my level of intention. It's always because I mean well for you. And if you get feedback from people that you're overwhelming them or coming on too pushy, really take that in and see if you can mute it down a little bit. Because we have to adjust. Some people can take more intensity, and some people are very highly sensitive and they can only take a little bit at first. And then when the trust is more and when they really get that we care for them, they can take a little bit more heat. But I think you got your finger right on what your growing edge is. To be able to speak your truth, but to do it in an elegant, graceful way so that it could actually be received. Thank you very much for the questions.
I was just going to say, you mentioned crucial conversations. Are you getting that in your current,
We need
in
to
the leadership? And
Yeah,
honestly,
it's really good.
it's pretty good.
Awesome, Doug.
I think the key word for me when we have a kind of discussion, and that is keeping it safe. In other words, you're not driving the other person to silence, who just won't say anything. Or you're not driving the person to aggression, where they want to attack you because they feel like they're being attacked. So
Yeah.
safe is a good word. And talk a little bit, because I don't want to make sure we get this in. You mentioned several times, it takes work.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? It takes a lot of work.
Yep.
It's not just a little work, right? So give us some about, if we're willing to put ourselves out there and do this work, what's the payoff? What do we get out of it?
Mm-hmm. You want to speak to that first, Charlie?
Oh, okay. Well, first, Joe, I think we have to define what we mean by work. A lot of us hear that term a lot. Oh, relationships take a lot of work. Yeah, so what exactly is the work that we have to do? And for what purpose? And how do we find out what our work is? And what does it mean to work on your relationship? So those are some of the questions I think we've got to really get clear about before we can even answer the question, well, what's in it for me, or what's the payoff? But I think it really is essential that we know the payoff. Even though we may not know exactly what the work is at this stage of the game, we have to know what possibilities are available to me if I do this work. In other words, why bother doing it?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's always got to be, whatever choice we make, there's got to be an incentive that's driven by an expectation of some value that I'm going to get by making this choice. So when we use the term work, what we're referring to is the effort that it requires to develop the inner qualities, the inner skills, the abilities that are necessary to participate in a mutually fulfilling relationship. So the key word there is qualities. It's not so much what the work is. I can't really know what the work is going to be until I know what qualities within myself I want to strengthen. So the subtitle of our new book is How One Couple Became Stronger at the Broken Places. And it was for us and for many people what it is. It's the breakdown that will tell you something about the qualities that you have to develop and strengthen, cultivate in yourself. So the work is actually about how I can become a better person, how I can become a person who is more skilled and more capable of creating and sustaining a mutually fulfilling relationship. So let's start with asking the question, what are examples of qualities, that is, aspects of yourself? Some people call them virtues or strengths or abilities. But what are examples of qualities that some people might need to develop?
Communication.
Okay, that's the skill of communication, to be able to become an effective communicator. In other words, to be able to, when we think of communication, what we think of is speaking in ways that create understanding and clarity. But communication, there's a second side to that. And what's that? Listening. Listening is as important a quality in terms of communication as speaking is. So to develop skill and competence in the ability to communicate effectively, to give and receive information. And that really goes to what you were saying about the two important things are honesty and respect. And your communication has to have both of those qualities in it. It's got to have honesty, but respect. Because honesty without respect can feel like you're bludgeoning somebody or trying to coerce them. But respect without honesty is misleading. You know?
First, you have to know your truth to speak your truth.
You have to know your truth to speak your truth. And here's the tricky part of that, is that sometimes, you may have noticed this, that sometimes we don't really know what our truth is until we're speaking, and then it's in the speaking that I realize, oh, I didn't even know that I felt that way, but I guess I do. Have you ever noticed that?
Dangerous.
Huh?
That's dangerous.
Yeah, well, that's why a lot of people don't want to speak until they're really sure of what they're going to say. And why a lot of people are really afraid of being extemporaneous in their speaking, because they don't even know what could be revealed to them and to the people they're talking to. So it requires the willingness to risk, right? What's a quality that that if you develop it, will help you to be more willing to take interpersonal risks?
Self-awareness.
That's definitely an important part of it. That is definitely an important part of it.
Courage.
The C word,
Courage.
courage. It takes more courage. People don't think of relationships as requiring courage. You know, good relationships, well, you know, generosity, kindness, love, caring, you know, all nice things. But it also takes a hell of a lot of courage. Because to be involved in a relationship where you're really, especially with somebody where there's some differences that you got to iron out, you've got to be willing to take emotional risks. And that brings up another quality that's necessary to develop courage. It's a word that starts with a V.
Vulnerability.
Vulnerability. What does vulnerability mean?
The ability to be open with someone else on topics that are somewhat personal.
The ability to be open with somebody else, especially with topics that can be personal, that can expose your the underbelly of your feelings, to not be defensive, to be literally, you know, if you look at the definition of vulnerability in the dictionary, what it says is to be at risk of being hurt or injured. You might get your feelings hurt. So these are some examples of the qualities that, these are some qualities, there's others too, that we need to be able to strengthen within ourselves in order to do the work. And there isn't any generic answer to the question, what exactly is the work of relationships? It depends upon what qualities you most need to strengthen within yourself and how committed you are to exercising practices that will help to strengthen those qualities. So, like if you want to develop courage, what practices might you want to take to strengthen your courage muscle?
Taking risks?
You might want to take risks. Yeah. You might want to take risks. That will help you to become more courageous. And the thing about that is that even if you fail, even if you fall flat on your face and it doesn't work, you've still won. You're still ahead of the game. Why? Because what you've done is you've taken a risk, you haven't fulfilled it, so hopefully you've learned something. There's an opportunity to learn something. And also you've gotten some practice. And third thing, you survived. Because our worst fear is, we're not going to survive.
Here's another example of what our work is to do to rise in relationship up into the levels of higher well-being. Because every good, solid relationship is built on a foundation of trust. So building trust in the relationship is part of the work. And I was so naive in the beginning when I got together with Charlie that I thought the trust was a steady ascent, that you just got more and more and more and more and more trust, like kindergarten, first grade, middle school, high school, go to college. It isn't like that. I'm here to tell you that it's up and it's down, and it's up and it's down. And sometimes the trust is lesser than, and then you need to do the work of rebuilding the trust. I'm so sorry that I scared you. This is a genuine apology. I'm sorry that I hurt you. Are you willing to forgive me that I broke that agreement with you? When the trust sags down, to be willing to be committed to the process of repairing it. And we didn't know any better. I thought, this is a black mark on the relationship. It's going to always be there. Too bad. I thought we were going to have a beautiful one. No, I didn't realize. You use all the crappy things that happen in the relationship as compost to bloom out of. And there will be some difficult things that will happen occasionally, but you can use them. So to restore the atmosphere of safety is partially the apology, must be sincere, no bullshit. And you must say, in addition to, I'm sorry, and this is what I have learned. I have learned that I'm too rash and impulsive and blurt things out, and I'm so sorry that I hurt you with that thing you said. Let's do a do-over. Would you let me start again? Let me see if I can say it in a more eloquent and respectful way. And I've learned going forward, give me a chance to show you that I won't blurt things out like that. Or that I won't withhold things that are really important to say. There's a lot of people who harbor things. To build trust, you have to have the self-assurance and the security that the person's not so avoidant, and chicken, that they're not bringing up the things that are important that must be spoken about in the relationship. And that's work too, to get our courage up, to find a way to bring the tough subjects up.
Talk to us a little about expectations.
Yes, this is a thing that I hear all the time, that it's important to not let your expectations be too lofty. And I'm not a believer in that school. I am of the school of thought of let your imagination be big. You can have big expectations for your relationship as long as you've got intentionality to meet them. Because the people who have the best relationships, the best, most beautiful relationships, they are responsible. They take responsibility. I have this goal, I have that goal, I have this vision for my life, and I don't expect anybody to bring it to me on a cake, bring it to me on a tray. I am willing to offer this. I am willing to bring this talent. I am willing to work on this weak suit to make it a stronger suit. I'm willing to grow and to be the best that I can be to bring it to you. I hope that'll inspire you to grow and bring your best to me. And that we could, if we work at it enough time and play with it enough time, we could be in that category of exemplary relationships, of high functioning relationships, where people aren't just together, because they're afraid to be apart or because of habituated patterns, but because they delight in each other. I told you at the beginning that Charlie and I have been together 50 years. When he walks into the room still lights up for me. Do you know? I'm mad about him. I'm crazy about him. And a lot of people, have this expectation that when you're together for a long time, and it gets predictable and boring and it's dull and the research shows that a lot of people had their best part of their relationship at the very beginning in the falling in love when they were in discovery, and then it's downhill after that. What a damn shame that is. Yeah, it can keep getting better as long as people are taking responsibility for growing and they use the relationship also as a growth opportunity. It can get better and better and better and better. We haven't hit the pinnacle yet. I think we're still ascending. Yeah.
So what quality do you have to have in order to have expectations?
I'm ambitious. I'm not ambitious about money or about power, that kind of ambitious, but I am ambitious about loving relationships. Not just with Charlie. My friends, do you know I'm in 2 women's groups? I really want, that's where I get my thrills from relationship, and I really want those relationships to be as close as they can be, for us to enjoy each other, to celebrate, to have confidants. I've got a list with 30 names on it. That's my dialing for dollars list. That's my real richness. Yes, please.
So would you say over time it changes from more or less to a friendship after 50 years with another person, the same person, or is it a mixture of both? How's it changed?
The friendship, I believe, has deepened, and sometimes there's a question inside a question, whether it's hot sexually in the beginning and then it gets dull afterward. I'm here to testify that the sex is still plenty hot enough for me.
Maybe you want to go into some detail?
I don't want to go into detail.
Just wondering,
So what happens if you're disappointed in your expectations?
I think that we owe it to ourselves to tell the truth about it. If we feel sad, if we feel bored, if we feel that the relationship is not evolving as much as we had hoped, to see whether we can have a profound conversation about, is there anything that I could do that could maybe lift it up? I have some ideas about what I would like in terms of participation from you, so that we could give it a joy jolt, do you know? And there's a lot of research about the old couples. I love hearing from the old couples that have been together 50, 60 years. And a lot of them are still really romantically involved and really enjoying the relationship. And they all say the same thing. Adventure, novelty, change. You can get into ruts over the years. You can get into habituated patterns. And so go on adventures out there in the world. Monday morning we're going to India for 3 weeks. Yeah. But also, not just adventures out in the world, the inner journey. be a psychonaut. Do you know the you know who I'm talking about, go out in space, and the psychonauts go into the inner space to know our inner life. And that can revitalize a relationship when we revitalize ourselves as an individual.
Going back, it's good to have expectations, as long as you know how to handle the disappointment.
Handle the disappointment and use, you may have to adjust down in some ways and not in others, but invite your partner into a conversation with you and see if the ceiling could be lifted. Maybe they just haven't realized that you're longing for more. And to have that conversation, they may be willing to join you. If you say, this is something that's really important to me, and it's not so important to them, you may need to look to other people, and I'm not talking about having an affair. Yeah, we're a monogamous couple, and we think that it's not about a moral thing. It's just practical, that it's very difficult to have even one relationship be really, really, really great. If you start siphoning off energy to other relationships, it's harder. And some people can do it. You know, everybody has to find their own truth about that. But there are other people, you know, if I've got a passion to go visiting more exotic places in this world and he feels like he wants to be home, I'm not going to give up on that expectation of what I think will be fulfilling in my life. Of course, it's my first choice that we share it, but I got other people I can go touring the world with. Len would go with me. Yeah, and so we need to be resourceful, but don't give up on this person before you even give them a chance, and let them know what's on your bucket list and what you're yearning for, what your needs and desires are.
Something that I've noticed going into like new relationships that are developing into something more, I'm starting to become aware of my defense mechanisms that I've set up in order to like make sure or ensure that I'm safe and that I'm not as hurt when it's like almost in my head I automatically think that there is an expiration date in relationships. And so I've noticed I've come up with these defense mechanisms. I was just wondering if you could like speak to the like if that's okay or how I can work on becoming more vulnerable and like knowing when it's okay to do that when it comes to new sprouting romantic relationships.
I think it's great that you're in touch with it, because most of us are kind of afraid to get deeply involved, and with good reason. We've seen people get hurt. I mean, you live long enough, you're all part of the scar plant, because people disappoint you, they lie to you, they exploit you, they let you down, and it's good to know that it's a little scary, or a lot scary to get into a relationship. It doesn't have to paralyze us. We don't have to not get in a relationship or bail out on a relationship when it starts to be scary, but we have to tell ourselves the truth, and we're always from the school of thought of report out more, reveal more. And so sometimes you need more reassurance, you need more safety, you need more trust. If you can put your hands on what it is, maybe they can come across with the goods. They can't read our mind. You know, we have to have an intimate relationship with ourselves and know what we really need, and then find the courage to ask. You want to speak to that?
It would help me if you could restate the question and really try to capture the essence of what it is that you're wanting to know. So see if you can put that in the form of a question that would be more specific about what it is that would help you to get to what you want to find out.
So when it comes to defense mechanisms that we've set within ourselves to help protect us from relationships,
Yeah.
what are some tools that I could use to help like disarmor them and allow myself to be vulnerable in new relationships?
All right. That's
like a big question.
No, that's great. That's great. And I agree with Linda that just the fact that you have a desire to become more open and more vulnerable, and you want to identify the barriers within yourself that are keeping you from exposing some of your deeper feelings, you're way ahead of the game. Because where most people are, and where I was for years and years, I was not looking to become more vulnerable. I was looking to become better at protecting myself emotionally. The problem with that, of course, is that if you succeed in, and I think you know this, otherwise you wouldn't be wanting to be more vulnerable, but if you succeed at that game, then you might be safe, but you'll probably be sorry, too, because what is it that cannot happen if your commitment to protection overrides your desire for connection? There's isolation,
Yep.
separation, disconnection, no contact, no real deep connection. So some people want to have it both ways, you know. They want to be safe, but they also are not willing to take the risk of being vulnerable. So the first step in that process is to recognize what your true intent is. Is it to be safe and protected, or do I want to connect? You cannot have it both ways. You can have it either way. You just can't have it both ways. So take a look right now within yourselves. And there's no correct answer here. And whatever for me, for years, my answer was, I'd rather not be vulnerable. And then at some point of being successful at that strategy broke down because I started feeling not so great. Started feeling distant, disconnected from other people, disconnected from myself, lonely. And, you know, when things start to break down, that is actually a good time. That's a good thing. Because what it says is that the system that you're using to protect yourself is now costing you more to maintain than you can gain from changing the system.
I'm going to give a couple of examples.
Yeah.
When I would notice that I was shaking in fear and trembling, oh no, I don't want to get my heart so involved, you know, I don't think he's committed as I am, he's going to end up leaving me and it's going to be so painful, and he's the first person I've ever let myself trust that much, I'm liable to just be so damaged that I'm going to turn into a shriveled up prune, you know, and my mind had this catastrophizing fantasy going about how hideous it was going to be. And I had to talk to myself and say, I think I'm stronger than just being totally ground down and defeated. If I do lose the relationship, I probably would be able to heal from it and pull myself together again and reconstitute and dare to get involved again. I think I probably won't be single for the rest of my life. Do you know that I have to talk to the inner critic that was scaring me? Hey, you don't want to get that involved. You shouldn't love him so much, and you know, it's dangerous, you know. And it really helped me. It really helped me to affirm that I was stronger than I feared. I feared that I was just too weak, and that if the relationship didn't make it after I had committed and invested myself, that I was going to just, you know, be the living dead, you know, walking around like a zombie. That's how frightened I was. That's how much I let the relationship mean to me. And so I used to use this poem line, I think it's Elizabeth Barrett Browning, that it's better to have loved than lost than never to have loved before. Is that Browning? And I used to tell myself, I'm learning how to love. I might lose him, but I'm going to keep on learning as long as I can. And if I lose him, I'll learn with somebody else. So there may be a way you need to talk yourself through. I'm practicing my skills. There's no way I can just do it in my mind. I need to get in there and mix it up and relate and practice my skills if I'm going to get good at this relationship game. And I'm scared, and I'm willing to tell the truth about that. This is scary.
Thank you.
But doable. Thank you for the question. Please.
To follow up with that too, can you talk a little bit about the other side of
if I understand your question, please correct me if I didn't quite get it. That if we get vulnerable, does that impact the person on the other side of the relationship?
Trying to rebuild the connection more after you've hurt the other person and don't try to be more again.
Yes, that both of us need to be committed to taking our armor off. Both of us need to be committed to laying down our shield and our sword. Both of us make a verbal agreement looking into each other's eyes from our heart. I want to be open with you and I want you to be open with me. And this is going to be the best way that we can heal from the breakdown that we just had. And vulnerability usually invites vulnerability from the other person. But we don't ever know for sure because there's no guarantee. Do you know, we may get vulnerable and they may come in for the attack and say, see, I told you so, you know. So it's scary. It really is lessons in courage. And sometimes the first time we gesture to them with, I'm so sorry that I hurt you, or I'm so sorry I let you down, I'm so sorry that I betrayed your trust, I really am sorry. And they're not ready to let go and forgive, and then they come after us, we feel like, well, I'm not going to do that again. Do you know? But if the relationship really means something to us, you heard of first line, second line, third line assertiveness? There's first line, second line, third line vulnerability. To let them calm down, maybe lick their wounds, go off and heal themselves a little bit till they're more available. And then we gesture towards them again. I really would like to heal this rift. Would you join me? Would you dare to trust me? I have learned my lesson here. Please, can we heal this? It's going to take both of us. It's not just my apology and learning. It's your willingness to be nourished by what I'm offering you now and dare to start again. It's a great question. You want to speak to it?
I see it a little differently.
You would.
Yeah, I would. I don't really think that it takes both people to be committed to vulnerability in order to repair a breakdown in a relationship. I think it's more often than not, one person is more committed than the other one is to vulnerability. It's, in my experience, rare that both people have a really solid commitment to it at the same time. Now, that doesn't mean that if one person is taking responsibility for bringing vulnerability into the relationship and the other person is holding them responsible for doing that, that's going to work, because it isn't going to work. It takes one person to start the process and to model vulnerability, to be willing to disarm themselves of their defensiveness, their walls that they're putting up, their strategies for keeping the other person at a distance. You know, it takes one person to be willing to do that. And when the process gets started, what's going to happen is the person with whom they are relating is going to be more likely to drop their defenses. Do you see why that's going to happen? Because they're not feeling so threatened anymore. We get defensive when we feel like there's something to fear, when we feel we're being threatened. And it's natural. If somebody says, in our, you'll see in our first book that you guys are reading, if somebody says to you, you're being defensive, well, you know what? There may be some reason why you're being defensive. You may have some reason, to not trust this person because, we talk about expectations. You may have had interactions with them in which they have gone after you. And, you are going to tend to be, guarded. And sometimes, you've got to be willing to be the person who initiates the vulnerability and takes responsibility regardless of how the other person is going to respond to it, to do it. So in a case, where there's been something that perhaps I might have done or said that had a hurtful impact on somebody, and I realized that. And if they were being vulnerable, what they would say is, wow, you know, what you just said really hurt. That means exposing yourself in a way that can feel dangerous to somebody that you don't trust to be respectful to you. We talked about respect and honesty earlier. And it takes, you know, it takes a lot to be that vulnerable, particularly with somebody who's just, you know, hammered you. But if the person who's on the receiving end of that attack can be that honest, can be honest enough to say that that really hurt me, or that scared me, or exposing one of the more vulnerable feelings. Anger generally is not a vulnerable feeling. It's a way that we actually insulate ourselves from the deeper feelings of fear and pain. So that's the challenge at that time. And even if I can find the courage to say, you know, that hurt me, exposing that vulnerability, the other person may not respect it, and then they may attack me for saying what I just said. Well, you know, I mean, like, what are you, super sensitive? What's the matter? Can't you take it? You know, I was just kidding. You know, we've all been in those kinds of encounters. And that's like another shot that I've got to be willing to absorb. But that's why we call it work, because we're challenged to do the very thing that we least want to do at a time that we feel.
I'm going to say something too. When you finish.
At a time that we, at a time when we feel most at risk. So that's where the courage part comes in. That's why we need to have courage, because I guarantee you, you get into a close relationship, you're going to take some hits. Guaranteed. It's not an if, it's a when. And it's a how. How are you going to respond to it? Are you going to respond to it by being counter-defensive with that person and then going back and forth and attacking and withdrawing and attacking and withdrawing? Or are you going to let down your guard? And if you get into a committed partnership, you're going to have plenty of opportunities to practice cultivating courage, vulnerability, commitment, integrity, all those things.
So when we talk about the work, doing the work of a relationship, that's to earn your way into the higher levels that relationship can be, it's fall down, get up. Fall down, get up. Begin again, begin again, begin again. Because in a long-term relationship, there are going to be misunderstandings. We're going to be cranky because we're overtired or we're stressed or we're hungry. We're going to say things we didn't even mean. Do you know? So it is a good rule of thumb to have an agreement in place that you can be imperfect, not to indulge yourself. You always want to hold the standard for yourself high to show up in the relationship to be the best you can be. And even with that kind of commitment, there are going to be breakdowns. There are going to be misunderstandings. We've all got sore spots, you know, and they go banging into our sore spot. Things, the leftovers from other relationships or family of origin, they're going to go banging into those. So it's a good agreement to say we are both committed to repairing when these outs happen, because they will happen. Some of them will just be small and you can fix them really quick. Some of them be medium-sized, take a little longer, and then they're the big ones that you really work with doing the repair. But if you have a commitment to repair, you're way ahead of the game.
Can you just tag on to that a little bit, the subtlety of control and speaking with not clear intention, but speaking with the intention to control? And these situations.
Yes, we all have our manipulative styles.
A little twisted there about patterns.
Patterns, yes.
You want to repeat the question?
The question is about the patterns that we use, like control, to try to keep ourselves safe. which sometimes ending up making us less safe. But we all have them. We learned them from our family, and sometimes we overshout or interrupt or withdraw and conceal, or we're dishonest, and there are all kinds of ways. They're all because we're frightened. Do you know, to the degree that we're unaware of our patterns, our manipulative patterns to try to keep ourselves safe, our shadowy patterns, we keep acting them out. And we keep hurting the other person and hurting ourselves and dragging the trust down. To the degree that we become more self-aware, catch ourselves red-handed, whoa, I just had tone in my voice when I said that. I was having a little sharp edge on my voice to scare her a little bit, or to scare him a little bit, that I have to have this. Do you know? And that's the controller in me that doesn't trust that we're going to be able to work this out for some kind of a mutual benefit to both of us. Let me rephrase that without the tone in it. I don't want to be the controller. Do you know, I really want to be higher level than that. I don't want to use my manipulative guilt tripper tactics or threaten or ultimatums. I want to be a higher level than that. I want to be straight up. I want to be vulnerable, asking for what I want. I want to appeal to my partner's enlightened self-interest, that it's to their benefit to meet me here. This is so important to me. And if I'm a happy camper, man, I'm going to be so generous to my partner because I'm going to be fulfilled and happy myself. Yes, Joe? Okay, we're wrapping up. Do you have any closing remarks that you want to say, or anything you need to say before we wrap?
Get time for one more quick question. Anybody got anything before we wrap things up? Yes, please.
You guys spoke about difference and like how can you use an opportunity? Like, is there any differences that like aren't able to like have common ground, or like how do you deal with differences that wouldn't have a black and white answer?
Yeah. How do you deal with things when it looks like there needs to be a black or white answer, but that's not always, often things are more gray than black or white, but sometimes we really see it in polarities. It's like this or this. So the challenge is really to be able to do what a very famous therapist named Marion Woodman refers to as holding the tension of the opposites. And the tension of the opposites means that two things that seem like they're at opposite ends of the spectrum and cannot be reconciled in some way need to be somehow, you need to come to terms with that in some way. And in a relationship, that can translate into what people refer to sometimes as deal breakers. That a deal breaker is a condition in the relationship in which one or both people are intolerant of, that they cannot live with this in the relationship. So for instance, where one person is committed to monogamy and the other person wants to keep their options open, that's a deal breaker until and unless it is resolved one way or the other. Because some things do have to come down on one side or the other. You can't have it, like I said before, you can't have it both ways.
Or another example would be one person wants to have family and the other person doesn't want to have children. There's no place for common ground. That's in the deal breaker category. Sometimes there's alcohol and drug addiction and they don't want to get treatment. That can be in the deal breaker category. Or there could be really difference in values, huge difference in values, so that you don't have compatibility. Most of the couples who break up aren't about these really severe ones. They're for medium level or even small ones, but they just don't know how to deal with the differences, like hold the tension of the opposites or work them out in a way that works for both. There are only a handful, like a half a dozen, of real literal deal breakers where you can't find common ground and it's destructive to the relationship.
So-
We're going to take one more, but there's a hand.
This is the last one.
Yeah.
So, you know, the bottom line here, and I think this is probably a good note to close on, is that we owe it to ourselves, I think, to really do the very best that we can do, to make our best effort to try to work things out when the differences do show up, and at the same time, to be aware that there may be differences that are really irreconcilable that we cannot live with. Couples who have great relationships still can have irreconcilable differences, but they can, you know, we're never going to get on the same page about certain things. But that doesn't mean that we can't include those differences in the relationship.
Right.
It's really a matter of whether we're able to focus on the things that do work and then look and see, is it worth it? You know, I'm willing to put up with an awful lot on this side that, you know, isn't exactly to my liking if I'm getting all my needs met over here. So there's no, you know, answer. It's really, that's why we have to know ourselves. We have to know what's going to work for me, what can I tolerate, what can I not tolerate, and we can grow that capacity. We can do that. But it takes time, it takes work. And bottom line is, it's worth it to do it. And that's if you look at the back of your book, 101 Things, what you'll see is that the very last one, the 101st one, is that what's possible in relationships, in terms of what you stand to gain, to get back to the question that came up earlier, is infinitely greater than what you can even imagine. And that's what I'd like to leave you guys with.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.